Hey guys, today I'm going to be talking about what happened in round 6 of the Sinquefield Cup played in St. Louis. In this game we have Fabiano Caruana playing Veselin Topalov, Caruana playing white, Topalov playing black. And Caruana is on an amazing streak, 5 out of 5. Topalov is in second place with I think 2.5 out of 5. Caruana is leading the field by at least 2.5 points. Quite a remarkable performance by him so far. Let's see what happened in today's game. In this game, Caruana started with e4, and Topalov played c5, the Sicilian defense, and after this, I think we get a very normal. I don't know what this is called. I'm not really familiar with the Sicilian defense, but some kind of a6 and e6 hybrid. I think it's what is this, a Paulson or something? I'm not really sure, but I think Svidler had something similar to this versus Topalov in the candidates. Um, and we kind of get this normal looking structure in the center, and with the c pawn gone, traded for the d pawn, and in this position, White decided to capture the knight here. Looks pretty reasonable. I mean, okay, and in this position, Black decided to recapture the b pawn. Um, a move like d takes c6 probably just leads to trouble. By the way, if you're wondering about this kind of thing, and bishop f4 preventing king c7 in this position, so you can always think about rook d1, and the king has to be forced back here. And Black is definitely struggling in this kind of position. Knight f6, and you can play rook d1 whenever you want, forcing the king, and probably after rook d1, king here or something, and bishop e2 solidly developing, or maybe even bishop e2 first, so that you can definitely think about castling in this position. I think also Black, let's say, tries to play bishop e4, trying to take and threaten this pawn, you can probably just castle over here. After the king moves to, I'm not really sure it moves actually, probably maybe this square or king e8. I'm not really sure. White can probably just play the knight a4 move here to threaten knight b6, and there's no way Black can really prevent knight b6 or knight c5, getting that knight in there, and this bishop cooperates along these dark squares well, and White is clearly better in this position. Anyway, that's a bit of a digression from the main game. It's totally different, the main game. In this position, Black decided to play b takes c6, and White can certainly think about e5, preventing, let's say, the d pawn push with White capturing on this square, and this kind of structure is very, let's say, pleasant with the isolated pawn, but of course, instead of d5, Black can try to, let's say, attack the pawn over here and try to create a weakness, and White would probably have to play a move like queen h5, bishop f4, or even f4 to try and defend this weak pawn, and White doesn't want to really, let's say, commit to the pawn push just yet. He can do this later on, but usually pawn pushes so early with the lack of development, without your pieces developed so far, especially with the king still not in the center, still stuck in e1, is not a good idea. And in this position, I think White played bishop d3, and let's see if I can find this move. So after bishop d3, Black decided to play d5, took his part in the center, and you can kind of see that this is almost looking like a French structure after e5, except the d pawn is still not on the board, and this kind of position is very interesting for White and for Black. White continued with castles. Black continued with his development. Certainly, a move like d4 is possible, but then again, you're kind of putting off your development from here. And even though the center is closed, I wouldn't want my king to be. I just want to complete my development before I do any kind of pawn pushes or pawn, let's say, yeah, pawn pushes in the center. It just makes more sense to, let's say, develop. And after knight e6, White defended the pawn. Maybe one idea he can think about in the future is this, or after e5, this rook is supporting the pawn properly, and he can think about not necessarily committing the bishop or the pawn to f4 so early. And I think Black plays bishop e7, continuing his development. He can't play bishop d6 because of the pawn fork here, forking the bishop and the knight, and a move such as bishop c5 blocks the c pawn's advance, and that's not really what Black wants. Bishop b4 doesn't really contribute to the position either because of probably just bishop d2 by White, and this is not so clear what is Black doing. Notice that if you capture here and try to take on e4, this is probably going to bite White in the bite Black in the butt. probably white can just capture the pawn here, and black's position's a mess. So going back, knight f6 was played, rook e1, and black decided on the safe, bishop e7, not fooling around with any of these other bishop moves. And in this position, white took some space on e5, controlling the f6 square and forcing this knight to go to another square. Black decided to move it within the pawn chain, makes a lot of sense, and queen g4 is played in this position. Generally speaking, I don't mind black's setup, but the problem in this kind of French structure is that even though black is has this nice pawn center and is very very solid in the center, white definitely has attacking chances with, let's say, a queen g4, which was played in the game, and he can definitely think about moving the h and f pawns. And as we see in the game, queen g4 is attacking this pawn, and it's not so easy to defend this. And certainly a move such as rook g8 is not appealing. g6 is looking terrible because of the moves such as like bishop f h6, preventing the castling of black's king. And he just played king f8, solidly defending the pawn over here. And in this position, white has a lot of options, but I think Caruana plays a very, very, let's say, solid move with knight a4, possibly looking at these two squares, and the knight really didn't really have a, let's say, a future here on c3 anyways. It can't really go to, e2 immediately because e5 is hanging, and with a move like knight a4, you're always preferring the c3 pawn advance, controlling the center right over here. Also, you're preferring c4 in this position, trying to open up the position, possibly by taking, moving this bishop, and playing rook c1 to apply, let's say, use the rook on the open file here, or semi-open file, depending on how black recaptures the pawn in the center. So, for example, like let's say if black plays bishop d7, I think white would play c4, and I don't know. I mean, queen c7. The ideas are the same. C takes, and here I think black would probably recapture. I don't know. Both look pretty bad, but c takes is probably just met by bishop f4 and rook here, and that's really really nice for black. In this position, black decided to play queen a5, bringing out his queen. Looks pretty reasonable. And in this position, white decided to play rook e2. Very very solid development again. White can also try bishop g5. With this idea of trying to attack the bishop, and black doesn't really have any better than, say, bishop takes g5. He doesn't want to play a move like f takes f6 here, probably because the entire structure looks quite weak after e takes f, and this possible pawn is hanging in this kind of position. And if you're forced to play a move like g takes f6, your position around your king is very very weak. In fact, after this, it looks just awful for black. Maybe even just take the pawn. That looks winning for white actually. So he doesn't want to play a move like f6, and it's really difficult to recommend anything else in this position for black other than just taking. And probably after queen takes h6, kicking out the queen, and the queen has to go back. I don't know, c5, black is trying to get some active play here. b3, solidifying the position. Bishop e7, just continuing his development. And white has quite a few options, but I think one I looked at was, you can play c4 in this kind of position, as well as the immediate queen f3, and followed by c4 is very very, let's say, very very comfortable for white. You have nice pressure in the center. The king hasn't castled. They can't get out of the center, and black is kind of annoyed, I think, in this kind of position. That was certainly interesting for white to play, but he played rook e2 instead. And after this, I think black played a good move in h5, kicking the queen here. You don't want to play a move. Sorry about this. Give me a second. You don't want to play a move such as like c5 in this kind of position. Probably because white probably has just b3. And the problem with this is white always has, let's say, a lot of annoying pressure with bishop d2, because now this knight's not now defended, and if, let's say, black tries to disrupt this connection right over here and threatens the bishop, white can probably just spend this tempo on the queen right over here, and after queen b5, knight c3, queen b8, whatever, the queen has to move somewhere. I don't know where else it would probably move. Queen b8, and here takes here. Notice that the queen would be defending that square right over there, and I don't know. I mean, this kind of continuation, that the sample line, I mean, is probably leading to an open center, and this is not so nice for black to play, given that his king is still on f8. So black doesn't really want to play c5 so fast, allowing, let's say, a quickly opening center with this kind of situation, and certainly c4 in this position is not ideal, helping white's cause there. And instead of this, black just played h5, and after white played queen f4, getting his queen, let's say, still protecting the knight, obviously. This is probably the best square. He doesn't want to drop back either for strategic ideas, I guess. This is just kind of inducing black to, let's say, play g5 and kind of weaken the structures. So g3, queen g3 is kind of meant to kind of bait black into making more weaknesses such as this. And white still has to make contact with this knight, and there's no other move for the queen here, really. And white just decided to play bishop g2, gaining a tempo on this queen. And now certainly black could have played g takes f. This could have happened in the game, and after just bishop takes queen and h3, kind of gaining space here on the king side here, trying to utilize the, let's say, king side advanced pawns over here in the open file. White would probably have to blockade both of them, and white would probably stabilize the position here. And after, let's say, c4 and bishop d2, white has got a very, very, let's say, stable advantage in this position by all the weak pawns over here. And certainly black doesn't need to commit to this kind of setup so early, but with an early h4. But it's very annoying to find a plan here for black. I mean, maybe black can continue with bishop b7, but again, white would have this plan in b3 and c4. So I think he's slightly better in this position. And certainly Topalov he doesn't even want to trade the queens in this kind of position after bishop d2. Topalov is a very, very, let's say, a fighting player, and he continued with queen c7, keeping the queens on the board. And after queen g3, backing up the queen over here to this square, Topalov decided to gain another tempo on the queen. Caruana played queen g4, and in this position, with black is actually, I think, really, really struggling to find a move that offers a safe position here. In the game, Topalov played rook g8, which is, frankly speaking, not a good move. In the, what he can do is try to play c5 and activate his pieces, but the problem with this kind of move is that it allows white to capture the g5 pawn, and of course rook g8 is met by bishop h6 check when this rook would be hanging after queen takes g8, and that's not good for black, obviously. And if black can't do that, he probably just has to take, right? And after queen takes, black has c4, and although this attacks the bishop, the problem with this kind of move is that white would have a very, very dangerous attack after bishop f5, smashing through in the position, and after, let's say, pawn takes bishop e6, forcing another, let's just say like this is kind of a breakthrough in the position, and after rook e6, black's king is under quite a bit of fire here in this kind of position. White has an attack here, and with perfect defense, I suspect black is doing okay, but maybe this was the best continuation for black, but it's certainly tough to defend if you're, let's say, calculating it about from this position. If you're kind of trying to envision it after this sacrifice here, it certainly looks dangerous when you're playing it over the board. And instead of rook e1, probably white can play queen g6, and the game continues. I don't know. So if you kind of go back, certainly this was possible for black to play c5. Maybe it's a very, very dangerous try. Maybe it's the objectively best one. Black can also consider h3, trying to, let's say, create a weakness here in the kingside pawn structure. But I think after just, let's say, captures h3, bishop takes g5, and I think you still have this bishop h6 there at rook g1, and black would probably have to capture here again after queen takes. I think black would probably just take here, and white has a pretty strong attack here after rook e1, c5, trying to get his pieces activated. Bishop b7 could be the next move, but I think white in this position would probably play f4, getting some very, very annoying counterplay with the bishop over here. And the only problem with white's position is that his knight is offside. If he could somehow get the knight to, say, g4 or e4 squares without, being captured, he would really like the position with all these weak dark squares over here. And after black would play c4, the main idea is that rook takes g2 is going to, let's say, sacrifice the bishop. Of course, black can't really take the bishop here first because I would have queen g7 picking up the rook over here. So you would at first have to play king e8. And only after this, white would actually be sacking a piece here, but he can sacrifice it in this way, bishop g6, a very, very nice move, attacking everything. And if you capture this, I'm very, very happy with queen takes g6, king d8, and queen takes e6. And with my two passers over here, I can always play like rook f2, king f1, and try to advance the pawns very, very easily. Black's king is also very much in grave danger. Black is struggling. You can look at that a little bit more in depth. Maybe instead of taking the bishop, black can play knight f8, but I think in this position, white can probably just play f5 and have like this superior, let's say, position of the pieces, and it looks like a very, very dangerous attack. You can look at that probably more depth. It looks very, very scary for black. Probably not good for black at all. So c5 was probably the best try, but it certainly looks dangerous with those ideas that I was mentioning with bishop takes, and a future idea with f4, f5, and ideas with bishop f5 trying to smash through the structure, and if black decides to take with e6, just those ideas. And in this position, black decided to defend the g pawn here against these kind of threats, right? It makes a lot of sense. But the only problem with this move, and also I should mention, instead of rook g8, black could also, maybe this is the safest option in retrospect, is to capture this pawn over here with the knight here. And at first you might be thinking, isn't this just met by rook takes e5 and bishop c3 picking up the rook over here? And of course, white would win the rook, but the problem is probably queen f4 by black to attack the queen would force this queen trade, and after white would pick up the rook, f6, let's say trapping in the bishop, and knight b6, trading off some more pieces, and this kind of position is not really clear. The bishop's going to be lost here in this kind of position after, let's say, king g8 and king takes h8, and I think black's safest option and probably most active option, and the easiest option to play. And I'm not really sure why Topalov didn't see this kind of continuation with allowing the rook to be gone, but f6 would be trapping it, and at least that in that kind of position, black would probably have some fighting chances. But the problem with the game continuation is that it just flat out is not good. After rook g8, white just continued with rook ae1, defending the pawn a lot. And even though black plays c5 here in this position, trying to get some activity, threatening c4, for example, white just decided to play c4 and block this pawn over here. And this structure is really not good for black. White can always think about knight c3 and pressure the d pawn over here, and I guess white can really focus about all of these pieces upon the king side, and white always has these ideas of rook e3, rook f3, and try to put pressure on the king side. This position is really not good for black. If he tries to close the position with d4, I think that white can just play like d3 in this position, and if black plays bishop e7, white can probably play queen h5, and I mean, this is just super, super uncomfortable, really. Certainly, you can also play a move such as f3, kind of overprotecting everything and control of the squares, and knight b2. You can also think about bishop e4, let's say trading off this light squared bishop and get total control of the position. There's a lot of ways of handling the position. I don't really see a very, very, let's say, comfortable way of going about this. Yeah, and in the game, I think black just took here, and after bishop takes pawn, black just continued developing, and in this position, Caruana played a very, very, let's say, silent move in the position, just h3, let's say, supporting the square, protecting the square, preventing black from playing h3, and, black doesn't really have that much counterplay in this position. He's not really afraid of queen c6 because of knight c3, and Black doesn't really have a threat in g2 because I have the queen here on the g4 square defending that, and Black is struggling to find any plan in this position. Any pawn move makes a lot of weaknesses in this position. So in this position, he just decided to play rook d8, trying to activate his rook. White brought the bishop over here to c3, overprotecting the pawn, and by doing so, he allows this maneuver of rook e3, rook f3, and Black is definitely struggling in this position, and I don't really know what to recommend for him. Black played knight b8, trying to fix the position of his knight here. Not many other options really. Um, I guess knight b6 is just met by bishop a5 probably, and Black is losing this knight. That's a pretty embarrassing for Black. There's not really any moves, I guess. And after knight b8, in this position, Caruana decided to continue with rook e3, kind of going for this idea at some point. And it's really difficult to recommend anything. If Black decides to, and also in this kind of position, I mean, Black is having difficulties in making a waiting move. In the game, he played knight c6, but the problem is, the problem we see is that Caruana plays a really nice move in this position, and we'll get back to this in a second. I mean, he can try to play bishop d5, try to trade off some pieces, but I think after bishop takes d5, and this position is just not good. And Black would be forced to take with the rook, as a move such as e takes is running into e6, and White breaks through in this position. Relying on these tactics on the diagonal, queen f5, and moves like queen h5 threatening mate, of course, are very annoying. White would have this idea to, let's say, capture over here, and Black tries to close the position. Queen h5 is already threatening a huge checkmate, and there's no defense actually against this move. If the bishop moves here, e7 check is pretty much GG. You can look at that if you really have any in-depth questions about that, but it's really difficult to recommend anything. I guess if queen c6, you can also kind of think about, or never mind about queen c6. But anyways, back to the game. Black decided to play knight c6, trying to develop his knight, trying to put some pressure in the center, and trying to make anything in this position. But the problem is it just flat out runs into, let's say, Caruana just smashing through with bishop takes e6, and the sacrifice pretty much kills Black. The computer recommends knight d4 in this position, and to be honest, after this, I would have never considered this move as Black, or for White even. But bishop f5 just retaining all the positional threats, and a position like this is quite nice for White. I mean, Black is definitely struggling. Although in this position, Black can fight on. Let me try to explain a little bit. Black just tries to, let's say, capture a piece off the board and tries to reduce the pressure. And after queen here, queen c6, rook f3, just applying more pressure over here. And well, I mean, it's not such a easy position. Probably queen g6 to defend the mate over here, and e6 would kind of keep up the pressure. And even though White is giving up the exchange over here, all the pressure remains on Black's position. And you can already think about weird moves such as knight b6 and queen b7, trying to maybe even pick up the pawns here, and Black's king is in a huge mess over here. This position is probably not safe. Actually, knight d6 is already putting pressure on the f6 pawn. Black's position is about to collapse. Perhaps that was his best chance, in retrospect, but even so, that position doesn't look that great. In the game, instead of knight d4, in this position, Black just decided to recapture, and this is probably the best practical try in red. Not best practical try, but it's the most understandable one. And in this position, White just continued with this check. That was the idea of playing bishop takes c6 to open up the f file. And Black decided to move the king over here. If he moves the king over here, I think queen h5 is actually threatening rook f7 check. And if Black plays the rook over here, you have this really nice tactical shot with rook f6 breaking through the whole structure, and Black is pretty much forced to resign as bishop takes f6 is running into this one. And there's no way to prevent the threats here in this kind of position. King h8 f7 is obviously dead for Black, and if you take here, and I think taking f6 with the rook, I think White would just capture the pawn over here, keeping all the threats, and well, this looks quite awful. And black, it probably does no defense. Queen takes g5 is as well decisive threat. And if you take with the rook, trying to, let's say, maintain the bishop in this position. Sorry, instead of yeah, takes, bishop takes, and in this position, I think given that the bishop is now not in e7 protecting the pawn, white probably can just capture the pawn here, threaten knight takes e6. I mean, and black just does not have a defense against that. Black would probably resign in that position, and I mean, I don't really see a way of going about it. Rook e8 is queen takes g8. Here, you still have this third of queen takes g5. The whole position collapses for black. Let's see. Knight d8 is probably running into, I guess, queen here and queen takes f6. So again, black is pretty much dead. And so he can't really go to g7. And in this position, he decided to go king e8. White took the pawn over here, attacking the rook, having all these kind of threats with, this kind of, these kind of threats. Knight takes c5 is also another one you can consider with the bishop into the king over here. Yeah, in this position, black played rook g7, and this is not really the best defense, but it's hard to find knight d4. I mean, maybe if you're in kind of a desperation mode, you can find it, but this knight is just attacking the queen, and in this position, white would probably just capture here, and maybe black can fight on in this position after like queen f7, and black is allowed to take a rook here and kind of exchange it into, let's say, kind of a bearable material based position. But from a material standpoint, this position's kind of bearable, but from a positional point of view, this position is pretty awful for black. And that white already has these ideas of bishop e5 and knight b6 check already, let's say, relying on the weak bishop over here to facilitate white's kind of tactical points. And if the bishop ever moves, you can always think about e6 pawn push check. So that's not very nice for black. He decided to play rook g8 in the game, but rook g7, I mean. And I think Caruana found again the strongest move in this position with queen h6 attacking the rook over here. And after this, black really has no defense. He played knight d4, and I guess one idea if you want to let's say, move the rook back, the idea in this kind of position is that white would probably continue with e6, threatening queen h5 check, and that would be actually checkmate after king. Well, that would be a direct checkmate, and there's not really a good way of meeting this. If you try to move the rook, allowing the king to run, white would actually play queen h7, attacking the rook over here, and the only way to save the rook here is rook f8. But as we can see, rook takes f8 is pretty much leading to disaster for black. If king takes, we have queen f7 mate, and if bishop takes, we have the queen hanging over here. Very nice combination there. And so rook g8 can't really be played, and Topalov just played knight d6, knight d4, but in the end, Caruana continued with e6 anyways, allowing this to come with check, and a move like bishop takes f3 is probably just running into queen takes g7, just taking the rook, and after knight takes here, queen check, this knight just drops here in this position, and white can just capture over here and be really okay. And king f8, queen takes here, black's position collapses. I mean, also on a, let's say, a strategic point of view, material point of view, black's position is okay. Let's say he has to move the bishop, right? Kind of gaining this tempo. White would probably just continue with these checks with bishop g7, queen g6 check, and knight b6, kind of blocking these squares. Black's position's really about to, he's about to even get mated or drop heavy material. You can check that if you want to, and probably more depth, but you can take my word for it that black's position is really not good. After e6, white always has these ideas of checks and forcing the black king to probably give up huge material. And well, I mean, black just decided to capture the rook over here, and after the simple recapture with the pawn, black is running out of moves, and the rook is hanging. And again, I think after rook g8, we have this simple idea of, this queen h7 move trapping the rook over here. And um, I wonder though. Rook f8 is probably met. Rook g8, probably just met by queen here, I guess, with queen f7. My bad, guys. Um, and black is struggling to find any moves. Maybe queen f4 is the best try, but after queen takes g7, and this is the idea for black to activate. I think white can just capture the bishop over here and allow this check, and king e2 comes, maybe takes here, and black is out of checks in this kind of position, and white should win. Queen takes e6. Note that is probably just met by king f1, and the rook is pinning the queen to the king. There's not really any kind of better moves in this position other than Topalov just played bishop f8 in this position, and the problem with this move is that it's just running into queen h5 check, and king e7 is forced, and now white just recaptured here, and black takes here. I think queen f7, king d8, king d6, and e7 pushing the pawn through, probably just forcing a promotion. White has all the ideas with queen e6 also. Queen e6 mate is also a threat. This position's pretty much a disaster for black. And after bishop takes g7, Topalov just actually resigned. Yeah, just another win by Caruana. He's 6 out of 6. Just an incredible result for him. I know the video is a bit long, but I hope you enjoyed it, guys. This is Infinite Flash signing out. Thanks for watching.